Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace. The morning arrived cloaked in a soft silvery haze, the kind that settled over the village like a gentle sigh. Tieu Nuong woke to the sound of the river murmuring in the distance, its waters a quiet companion to her solitary days. She rose from her mat in the small wooden house, her movements slow and heavy, as if the weight of her heart had seeped into her bones. The air was cool, tinged with the earthy scent of damp soil and the faint sweetness of blooming wildflowers along the riverbank. She tied her faded green shirt around her waist, her fingers lingering on the frayed edges, and stepped outside. The familiar sounds of the countryside greeted her, the crowing of roosters, the rustle of leaves in the morning breeze, the soft hum of the village waking up. She walked to the edge of her small vegetable garden, her bare feet sinking into the soft earth, and surveyed the rows of greens that had become her livelihood. The cabbages stood tall, their leaves curling inward like protective hands, while the bok choy glistened with morning dew, their vibrant green a stark contrast to the gray sky above. Tieu Nuong bent down, her hands deftly plucking the ripest vegetables, her fingers brushing against the cool, damp leaves. Each cabbage felt heavy in her hands, a small burden that mirrored the ache in her chest. She filled her woven basket slowly, the weight pressing against her shoulders, but her mind was elsewhere. She thought of her mother, who had once tended this same garden, her laughter a melody that could chase away any sorrow. She thought of the days when the house had been filled with warmth, when her mother's voice had woven stories of hope and love. But those days were gone, buried beneath the years and the earth where her mother now rested. Tieu Nuong was alone now, an orphaned girl carrying the weight of her past, with only the garden and the man who had recently left her, Mr. Chung. Mr. Chung had been a steady presence, a man whose quiet kindness had lit up her days like a lantern in the dark. He was a carpenter from the next village, with hands roughened by wood and a smile that felt like a rare gift in her lonely world. They had met at the market one sunny afternoon, when he'd bought a bundle of her greens and stayed to talk, his words simple but warm. Since then he had become a constant in her life, never demanding, always there with a kind word or a shared moment. He spoke of dreams, of building a better life, of crafting things that lasted. "I'll make you a proper shelf one day," he'd said once, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "One that can hold all your dreams." Tieu Nuong had laughed, but inside her heart had trembled. She had wanted to believe in his words, in the future he painted with his quiet promises. But yesterday he had left, called away by his work, and the emptiness he left behind felt heavier than the basket on her back. She hoisted the basket onto her shoulders, the bamboo straps digging into her skin, and adjusted her conical hat. The path to the market wound through the village, past houses with thatched roofs and children playing in the dirt, their laughter a faint echo of the joy she once knew. The river ran alongside the path, its waters shimmering like a ribbon of silver, a quiet witness to her solitary journey. At the market, the air buzzed with the chatter of vendors and buyers, the scent of fresh produce mingling with the smoky aroma of grilled fish from a nearby stall. Tieu Nuong spread a mat on the ground and arranged her vegetables in neat piles, cabbages on one side, their leaves curling like protective hands, and bok choy on the other, their vibrant green a stark contrast to the faded mat beneath them. "Fresh cabbage and bok choy," she called, her voice soft but clear, her eyes scanning the crowd with a quiet hope. The morning passed in a blur of transactions. An old woman stopped to chat about the weather, her hands trembling as she picked out a small bok choy. A young mother haggled for a better price, her child clinging to her skirt, his eyes wide with curiosity. And then a man approached, his steps slow and deliberate, his face weathered by years of sun and toil. "Do you sell cabbage?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. Tieu Nuong nodded, gesturing to her pile. "Cabbage and bok choy, come and choose," she said, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. The man knelt beside her, his hands brushing against the leaves as he examined each vegetable with care. "They're big," he said, lifting a cabbage, its leaves so wide they seemed ready to burst. "Too big, maybe they might crack." Tieu Nuong smiled faintly, her fingers tracing the edge of her mat. "Big ones are good for a family," she said softly. "Take 2 more if you like." The man nodded, selecting 2 more cabbages, their weight pulling at his hands as he lifted them. "How much?" he asked, his eyes meeting hers. Tieu Nuong hesitated, her mind drifting to Mr. Chung, to the way he'd smiled at her the last time they'd been at the market together. 5,000 dong each or 50,000 for a bundle, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man frowned, his brow furrowing. This one's too big, I'll just take a small bundle, he said, handing her the money. Tieu Nuong took the bills, her fingers trembling slightly, and placed them in her pocket. Thank you, she said, her voice tinged with a quiet sadness. The man nodded, his figure growing smaller as he walked away, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She sat back on her heels, her hands resting in her lap, her eyes fixed on the river in the distance. The market buzzed around her, but she felt detached, as if she were watching it all from a great distance. She thought of Mr. Chung, of the way his laughter had filled the silences in her life, of the warmth in his touch, the steadiness in his presence. He had left yesterday, his parting words a quiet promise to return, but the emptiness he left behind was a heavy weight on her heart. She wondered if he thought of her, if he missed her the way she missed him, or if she was just a fleeting moment in his busy life. He'll be back, she whispered to herself, but the words felt hollow, like a prayer spoken into the wind. The sun climbed higher in the sky, its rays breaking through the haze, casting a soft glow over the market. Tieu Nuong sold more vegetables, bok choy to a young woman with a bright smile, cabbage to an old man who told her stories of his youth. Each transaction was a small victory, a step toward survival, but the ache in her chest remained, a quiet reminder of her solitude. She thought of her mother, of the lessons she'd left behind, of the way she'd taught her to find joy in the simple act of growing and selling. The earth always gives, her mother had said, her hands stained with dirt, her smile a beacon of hope. But now the earth felt cold, the joy distant, and Tieu Nuong felt the weight of her loneliness like a stone in her chest. By midday, her basket was nearly empty, her pockets heavier with a modest sum of money. She packed up her mat, her movements slow and deliberate, and began the walk back home. The path wound through the village, past the river that shimmered in the sunlight, its waters a quiet companion to her solitary thoughts. She thought of Mr. Chung, of the life they might have together, of the dreams he'd spoken of in the quiet moments they'd shared. She thought of herself, of the girl she had become, strong but weary, hopeful but cautious. The river murmured softly, its voice a gentle lullaby, but it offered no answers, only its steady, unending flow. Back at her house, Tieu Nuong set her basket by the door and stepped into the small kitchen. The room was sparse, with a single wooden table, a clay stove, and a shelf of mismatched dishes. She lit the stove, the flames crackling as they consumed the dry twigs she'd gathered the day before. A pot of water went on to boil, and she pulled out a small cabbage she'd kept for herself, its leaves curling inward like a protective embrace. She chopped it slowly, her hands steady despite the ache in her heart, her mind drifting to Mr. Chung, to the way he'd looked at her the last time they'd been together. "I'll be back soon," he'd said, his voice soft, his eyes warm with promise. But the days without him felt endless, each one a quiet battle against the loneliness that threatened to swallow her whole. She sat at the table, a bowl of steamed cabbage before her, the steam rising in delicate curls, its warmth a faint comfort against the chill of her solitude. She ate slowly, her eyes fixed on the river outside, its waters glinting in the fading light. The village was quiet now, the sounds of the day giving way to the gentle hum of evening, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the soft murmur of the river. She thought of her mother, of the way she'd hum while cooking, her voice a melody that could chase away any sorrow. She thought of Mr. Chung, of the life they might build together, of the dreams he'd spoken of in the quiet moments they'd shared. But she also thought of herself, of the strength she carried, the resilience that had kept her going through the years of solitude. The moon rose, its silver light filtering through the trees, casting a glow over the garden outside. Tieu Nuong stepped onto the porch, her bowl empty, her heart a tangle of longing and hope. She looked up at the stars, their faint light a quiet promise, and thought of Mr. Chung, of the warmth in his smile, the steadiness in his presence. She wondered if he was looking at the same sky, if he was thinking of her, or if he had already forgotten the girl who sold vegetables to survive. "He'll be back," she whispered to herself, but the words felt fragile, like a leaf trembling in the wind. Would Mr. Chung return as he'd promised, his arms full of warmth and laughter? Would Tieu Nuong find the courage to trust again, to love again, or would she remain as she was? A solitary figure in a small house, surrounded by the river and the memories of a life once shared? The moonlight offered no answers, only its silent, silver glow, and the river whispered softly, a quiet witness to her longing. For now, Tieu Nuong had the garden, the vegetables, and the memory of a man who had brought light to her days, a small constellation of hope in the vast starry sky of her life.